Cher Augustin, chers amis, bonjour à vous tous. Il y a d'abord une difficile question de langue quand on se retrouve à Paris Europlace. Je parlerai principalement en anglais, mais je commence volontiers par quelques mots en français. Merci de ce que tu as dit, notamment sur ma disponibilité au diable Vauvert, mais le pavillon Gabriel, malgré les embarras de la circulation, est quand même nettement plus près, donc j'ai grand plaisir à me retrouver ce matin. Alors évidemment, notre conférence arrive à un moment très particulier. Nous sommes 5 jours après la décision historique de l'Eurosystème de baisser ses taux directeurs de 25 points de base, ce qui marque une orientation décisive. Nous sommes 2 jours après les élections européennes et la décision de dissolution en France. Je ne vais pas vous surprendre, je suis un banquier central indépendant et donc mon rôle n'est pas de faire des commentaires politiques. Mais le fait est qu'en préparant ces remarques introductives, avant dimanche dernier, je comptais déjà souligner cette aspiration commune de beaucoup d'Européens, la souveraineté, et je le ferai sous 2 espèces, la souveraineté monétaire et la souveraineté économique, monetary sovereignty and economic sovereignty. Let me switch to English and first warmly thank Europlus and all of you for the impressive results we achieved together. Paris keeps gaining momentum as a financial center post-Brexit and has, since last year in particular, further grown as a hub for market activities, without any doubt, in continental Europe. This Parisian momentum has even exceeded our expectations. Success breeds success, and I hope it also for the future. Let me now turn to my first item, monetary sovereignty. The euro is a huge popular success, which most Europeans, irrespective of their votes, support. Let me share with you the last Eurobarometer figures of last May. They are impressive. 78% of euro area citizens, 74% of French citizens support the euro. We are gradually emerging from the inflationary crisis that had affected our economies and fellow citizens since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Remember the figures. Inflation peaked at 10.6% in October 22 for the euro area as a whole, and has since receded to 2.6% last May. Beyond the reversal of the initial supply shocks, monetary policy, yes, has played its role. I stress it because there could be a fashion to say it was too easy and monetary policy didn't have any contribution in this success. No. We estimate that the contribution of monetary policy to the disinflationary process is significant, between 1 and 2% inflation avoided this year. And it went through 2 channels. The first one is a traditional one, dampening credit and demand. The second one belongs more to modern monetary policy by re-anchoring inflation expectations sufficiently close to our 2% target. Therefore, the time had come last Thursday for a first cut and having now a somewhat less restrictive monetary policy. This brings with it a question, because it de facto creates a temporary divergence between monetary policies in the euro area and the US. On the other side of the Atlantic, as you are aware, inflation has been proving stickier than expected a few months ago, And even though economic activity slowed down during the first quarter, it remains more sustained than in the euro area. However, this divergence primarily reflects a difference in timing rather than a difference in orientation. By the way, Augustin, I agree with all what you said in your introduction, with one nuance, if you allow me. I don't think the US are practicing monetary creation at a different scale or in a different way. This difference of timing is expected to have limited spillover effects on the euro area due to offsetting channels. And let me explain a bit. On the one hand, there might be some downward pressures on the euro-dollar exchange rate, which have so far remained contained, as it has already been discounted by markets. One of the great advantages of having built our European currency is that the euro area has a large economy. Our single market, we should never forget it, is the same size as that of the US market. It is hence less influenced by the exchange rate, whose pass-through to consumer prices is lower than 10%. Let me clarify. If the dollar strengthened, say, by around 1% against the euro, it would increase our euro area price index by less than 0.1%. According to a Banque de France study, the pass-through could even be smaller than 0.1, around 0.05. On the other hand, high for longer interest rates in the US might exert some upward pressures on global long-term bond yields and therefore have, on the contrary, a tightening effect on financial conditions and disinflationary in the euro area. To sum up, taking into account these two opposite effects of contagion, US monetary policy on balance should not greatly affect that of the euro area. Thanks to the euro, Europe has gained in monetary sovereignty. Besides, the comparison of the monetary stance in the US and the euro area must take into account the spread between the levels of the neutral interest rates. You probably heard about this famous R star, which everybody speaks of, but which nobody can precisely measure and observe. This is the charm of R star. R star is the interest rate which can achieve price stability, due in particular to differences in demographic and productivity trends in the US. It could be close to 1 percentage point higher in the US than in the euro area. In the euro area, it is estimated at between 2 and 2.5%. This neutral level, let me stress it, is not necessarily the destination for our current rate-cutting phase. It simply shows that we have significant leeway at 3.75 to lower our rates before exiting restrictive territory. What about our next rate cuts? I will not give a precise answer this morning, but I plead for a pragmatic gradualism, both on the timing, without haste nor procrastination, and on our terminal rate. Let me explain one thing. When we say we are data-driven, we are monitoring actual inflation data, in particular those on services, but monthly actual figures will be volatile this year due to base effects on energy. And this noise will not be very meaningful. Hence, we are still more outlook-driven, and we will look closely at the inflation forecast. We remain confident that bearing an external shock, we will bring inflation back to our 2% target by next year, and that we will reach this target with a soft landing rather than with a hard one. It will be a lot better path for our European citizens, their income and their jobs, and for the healthy conduct of fiscal policies. Talking of fiscal policies, let me stress that of the US. This deficit could significantly affect the level of long-term interest rates. A large US fiscal deficit tightens financial conditions and fuels US inflation. According to the IMF, it is expected to reach close to 6.5% of GDP this year, while the fiscal deficit in the euro area should stand at 2.9%. Furthermore, new European fiscal rules and gradual economic recovery should hopefully be conducive to fiscal consolidation in Europe, which will contribute to reduce inflation and to reduce long-term interest rates. And let me now turn to my second side of sovereignty, economic sovereignty. Obviously, the world has become tougher and more fragmented. Can I use a word tested by the IMF? Slowbalization, not globalization, slowbalization. It captures it well. Economic and financial relationships are increasingly weaponized. Many countries are seeking to reinforce their resilience to external shocks, be they willful or not. This is true for the US, and it should be true for Europe, which suffered from its past reliance on Russian energy. Economic sovereignty has therefore been a growing focus of attention in Europe. And no single country has the economic clout to be in a position to respond to global challenges on its own. The European Commission has already launched many actions to strengthen our common economic security. That said, we must recognize that in the fragmented world of 2024, our continent has three potentially contradictory wishes. Can I sum up with a simple triangle? A, stronger social and environmental rule. No, not yet this one. This will be the answer. Stronger social and environmental rules. Second, greater trade openness. And third, maintaining competitiveness. You rightly used this word, Augustin. How can these potential contradictions be reconciled? The Draghi report in July will come up with its own answers. There is obviously no simplistic solution. Yes, we need to simplify our rules while keeping the core principles of our climate standards. Yes, we need a more muscular and faster Europe in tomorrow's trade negotiation, but without lapsing into protectionism, which would make no sense at national level, but would also be a great loss at European level. Europe's soft power is based on compliance with international rules and multilateralism. Our union is a very open economy. Can I give one simple figure? 40% of its total trade takes place with third countries, and our union has widely benefited thereof. But it must remedy its existing and potential vulnerabilities. One of the main obvious steps is to de-risk and reduce our dependencies to critical imports by diversifying supply sources. Besides reducing our vulnerabilities, let me insist this morning on two strengths, and here I come to this slide, two strengths that we can and must beef up. Neither of them involves additional public expenditure. We obviously no longer have the means to use and abuse fiscal largesse. Rather, through these two economic reforms, Europe has ample leeway to build inner strength in order to fully unlock its potential. First, we must leverage our size through the single market. You will have this conversation with Enrico Letta this afternoon. While often seen as a thing of the past, the glorious economic legacy of Jacques Delors, the single market is clearly a subject for the future. The IMF estimates that a 10% reduction, 10% only, 10% reduction in internal barriers and frictions would generate significant gains of around 7% of GDP for the benefit of all EU countries. In his report, Enrico Letta made several proposals. Among others, he proposes the introduction of a fifth freedom focusing on research, innovation, knowledge, and education. And here, clearly, there is room for improvement. And the EU should not break ranks. Investment should not go to countries where governments are more able and willing to provide national state aid. This is a very costly intra-European competition. But investment should go where economic resources are best used. And subject to greater national fiscal discipline, Europe could and should arm itself with a common fiscal capacity, giving priority to common public goods. Second, muscle, financial muscle, if I may, here at Europlus. It's time for Europe to align its financial power with its economic heft. This is obviously a conviction we all share at Europlus. For too long, Europe has left financial strength to others. For too long, it has neglected its asset of competitive banks and financial institutions. In this respect, France is probably better equipped and more lucid in Europe, because France has the advantage of having very strong banks and financial institutions. Europe must tap into what I call its unknown resource of its vast saving surplus, and this is the left panel, to finance the investment needs of the transition. This is the right panel. All in all, if you look at the left figures, after deducting public deficits, the EU's net lending position amounts to almost 2% of GDP and more than 300 billion euros, to be compared with the financing needs of the right for the green transition. So it could finance, from a macro perspective, a significant part of our green and digital needs. This is obviously about the well-known Capital Markets Union. How to relaunch it? And let me conclude with some remarks in this regard. It could be rebranded to reflect its higher purpose. For instance, let us speak of a savings and investment union. And new ambitious instruments need to be deployed. Let us focus our efforts on a few selected levers, of which I will now provide 3 examples to complement the Noyer report. Equity financing. which is crucial for innovation, but it is an area which Europe lags far behind the US. Are you aware of this figure? In Europe, equity accounts for a mere 84% of GDP compared with more than double, 173% across the Atlantic. This funding could be boosted by an ambitious public-private partnership with the possibility of public backing for pan-European venture capital funds. Second, green securitization, provided it is sufficiently secure. It could boost banks' capacity to finance green projects by several hundred billion euro a year using the new European Green Bonds label. Third, while we celebrate the 10th anniversary of our supervision union and the success of the SSM this year, the banking union is still incomplete, and we should acknowledge it. This continues to hamper the emergence of pan-European banks. For banks, and we see it in the US, size is objectively a factor of competitiveness, particularly as it enables banks to amortize the cost of indispensable investments in digital technology, AI. European authorities must relentlessly step up the fight against too many short-sighted differences in national positions and obstacles by so-called host countries. Europe must also transpose Basel III, not less, but let me also stress it, not more. And we are confident the US will transpose. We are very attentive to the timing. Let me sum it up this way. We in Europe shouldn't fear bigger cross-border European banks if managed and supervised closely. On the contrary, we should foster bigger pan-European banks. Let me conclude by paraphrasing the French philosopher Raymond Aron. It was some decades ago about the victory in the war in 1939. If I said it today, we can believe in the success. Je vais quand même le citer en français de mémoire. Nous pouvons croire à l'époque, nous pouvons croire à la victoire des démocraties, mais à une condition, c'est qu'elles le veuillent. Today, we can believe in the success of the European economy, but on one condition, that we have the will to be successful. In a more fragmented, in a tougher world, Europe has effective levers at its disposal. Our economic destiny is largely in our own hands and in our own minds. Thank you for your attention.